Well, hi, welcome to Coffee with Cassie. Today we have with us Pete Peterson. He is a professor of psychology and also the chair of psychology here at JCCC. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, good. Well, today we really want to talk about classroom management and specifically the certain skills to becoming a successful college student with classroom management. I know when I was a student, a big one was getting to class on time, which sometimes difficult, but just starting out on a good foot. So from a faculty perspective, what recommendations do you have about managing that classroom setting?
Okay. Getting to class on time is a good idea, but also I think just over the course of the semester, staying on top of the syllabus and knowing what's expected and when. Some professors will, give warnings like this paper is due next week. Other ones will go, look at your syllabus and that kind of thing. And then in addition to that, I think just be prepared to work hard. It's should be more difficult than high school, and I think some students come in thinking, oh, this will be easy like high school, and it's not.
Do you have any, I know technology is big coming in classrooms, whether it's laptops, tablets, or phones. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle those appropriately in class spaces?
Well, I tell my students it's okay to have their cell phones on, but set it to vibrate, or so that they can, if they need to take a call, then they can go outside and take it. I might be a little unusual because I don't allow computers in my class, mostly because students get distracted, as I would, with those. So they have to take notes the old-fashioned way. But I do tell. Actually, here's a classroom management kind of idea. I tell them, it might be helpful for them to take their handwritten notes and then transcribe it into their word processing program. That's transferring it more than once is always a good way to learn.
Right, definitely. Writing it down for me always helped, and just being able, I like to circle things, highlight things. You can't exactly do that on a computer, so.
Right.
Yeah. What about students who come in and they might be getting distracted by the person next to them, maybe texting or being on something else on their computers? What would be your recommendations for them?
Well, if I was the student and I had that problem ongoing, I'd move to another location. But in my classes, I'm kind of on top of that anyway. And so if someone's being distracting, they'll have to go outside and be distracting out in the hall. But I would just move. I mean, I'd say something first, and then if that didn't work, I'd just move.
Yeah, definitely. And in regards to sitting in classrooms, I know you hear a lot about professors saying like sit up front, or you're going to learn better if you're more in front of the classroom. From a professor, how is that? Is it best to probably sit up front?
Well, I think so. In fact, my story as a college student, when I started out in college when I was 17, I sat in the back, and if I showed up to class at all, and I didn't pay attention. When I went back to school the second time and got straight A's, I sat in the front, and it forced me to pay attention and listen to what was being said.
Yeah, well, you hear a lot in college is you get out what you put into it. So with that and being in the classroom, what would be your suggestions for students on how they could really get the best out of their classroom experience?
Well, I think engaging in the class activities is important, but also if you run into trouble with any of the material, to go engage with the professor and talk to them about what, ask them questions. And I tell my students in class, always feel free to ask a question, and there are no dumb questions in class. And I also tell them, if you are wondering what I'm talking about, and probably everybody else is, and they'll think you're a hero for asking the question that they might be afraid to ask. One other thing I wanted to talk about is perseverance is so important in the classroom. As I'd mentioned, when I went to college the first time, I didn't do well, and I think my GPA is 1.6 after a year and a half of college. And I quit college for a while and worked, and then when I went back to college, I got a 4.0. And part of that was just this desire to succeed and persevere. And when I did go back, I had this professor who had done a study. I wasn't in the study, But he looked at what are the factors that determine how successful you're going to be in college, and he had given students an IQ test. He gave them, these were graduate students, but it would fit for undergrads too, but he gave them the GRE, which is kind of like the SAT for grad students, and gave them a personality test, but he also gave them some tasks to do, and one of the tasks was to sit at this control panel and just turn this knob over and over and over again. And some of the students after a while got bored with it and left, and other students sat there and just kept turning the knob. When he followed up on their success, their GPA, their graduation rates, and everything else, the best determinant of success in college was turning that knob over and over and over again. It was a perseverance measure, and so if you're willing to stick with the work, and you'll succeed.
All right, so I know some professors like a certain learning environment, and with students coming in, I mean, they might be taking their lunch break, in the middle of class, or need to step out and take a phone call. But from your perspective, what kind of environment would you like to see that's most conducive to learning?
I'm pretty flexible in my classroom with students, eating and taking their lunch break. And if they need to take a phone call, I ask that they go outside of the classroom and take it. I know there are other professors on campus who have more strict rules about that. No phone calls while you're in class. And some professors will lock the door at the beginning of class, and so you're out of luck if you come in a few minutes late. My students can come and go as they want to. The one thing I do ask, though, is that they do it kind of quietly. I think only once in the last 30 years have I had a student, in fact, a couple semesters ago, who would come in and make a show out of it. He'd kind of saunter in and walk right through the middle of class, and that wasn't. I had to talk to him about that. But generally, students come in, they're quiet about it, and they'll sit down and that kind of thing. What else I like in my class is participation. So, asking questions is good, but also if a student has a relevant comment about the topic, I'd like to hear from the student, because that adds perspective for all the students in there. So, for example, if we're talking about attention deficit disorder in children, a student might go, yeah, my little brother had ADHD and he was taking this medication, that. It lends a little, bigger picture for the students to.
Right. Brings it more down to a personal level.
Right. But I do like, if my students are engaged, I think they'll succeed in the class. So asking questions, doing the work, coming to class prepared to take tests, and turning in papers on time. All those kind of things are just important skills to have. And they're not only important skills for college, they're important work skills too. So someday you get out in the workforce and your boss wants you to show up on time and get your work done on time.
Yeah. Read the material ahead of time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being with us today. And for more interviews, you can go to the Cassie Coffee menu. That's all for today. See you next time.